You were the sort of leading marriage guidance counsellor for the coalition, weren't you, in your last months?
I think that's been exaggerated. Facilitator is all I would say. And I think what I did with help from you and many others was to actually kind of lay out as far as one could what were the rules of this kind of procedure. I mean, unclear parliaments are quite difficult for us. So with a hung parliament, it was, well, how are you going to sort out what happens next? And of course, there can be a lot of false stories around as to, oh, well, such and such, well, the Prime Minister's got to resign immediately, or Prime Minister mustn't resign. And it was important to establish what the conventions were, what the rules were, to ensure that the Queen remained above politics. I think those things were important. And then to let the political parties get on with it. So it wasn't a question of me attempting to bring about any particular result. It was the question of letting the political parties get together in whatever form they wanted, and for them to resolve the issue, because that's the way it should be in a democracy. David Cameron was someone who you could see was used to managed a very difficult start. He didn't get an overall majority, and some in his party were thinking, why can't we rule on our own? And of course, his cabinet, he had to find room in his cabinet for some, 6 Liberal Democrat ministers, and so disappoint some of the people who'd been with him all the days who thought they would be in cabinet. So it was a very difficult place to start, and of course there was no history of coalition. So, the fact that he and the Deputy Prime Minister made things work and got on, and they weren't the lowest common denominator. They actually got together and said, right, there's a big deficit problem, let's have a spending review, let's embark on some big radical changes in welfare, in health, in transport, in education. I think kind of contradicted what a lot of people thought would be coalition, which would be, oh, it's mushy, they're not going to do very much, they won't be able to do anything. We've seen with this government that you could criticise them for many things, but actually you couldn't criticise them for lack of action.